Drowsy and ready to sleep, let the morning time drop all its petals on me. Life, I love you, all is groovy. It's a still life watercolor.
Welcome. It's April in Vermont and the daffodils are frozen.
Yes, they are.
Welcome to Stuck Together, Stuck Apart, Family Success During the Quarantine, brought to you by the Vermont Center for Family Studies. We're going to be exploring what does it look like to be free together and free apart while we're stuck together and stuck apart. And Vermont Center for Family Studies, as many of you know, we're here to strengthen families of all kinds through a very interesting body of knowledge that has a lot of information in it about family leadership and how families operate, called Bowen Family Systems Theory. And we do it mostly by training helpers, but our programs, including this one, are wide open to other people, people who lead groups, people who are executives, people who are just family members thinking about how to succeed with their families. And I'm very happy to have with me here Kaylee Kelton, who is on the faculty of the Vermont Center for Family Studies. Kaylee Kelton is a therapist. I call her a family therapist, but she mostly just talks to individuals, helping them think through the challenges they're facing. Hi, Kaylee.
Hey, Eric. Good to
How's
see
it going?
It's going. It's going. Thank you. What's that?
I said good neutral answer.
Yes.
I want to remind folks one of the best ways to manage a large Zoom meeting like this is to put your Zoom on presenter view, which is one of the options you have in the upper right corner. And today we're going to be talking about family reactivity leadership lessons from a virus.
Yeah. So one of the things we're going to do today is just review the schedule in that kind of like last week, Eric and I are going to spend some time discussing some things about what we're seeing, what we're observing, sometimes on some slides that Eric has developed about the virus, and some interesting kind of connections perhaps between the virus and family anxiety that will be interesting to explore. And then at about the half-hour mark, we will break out into groups of 2 or 3 to discuss what you all are thinking and what this is stimulating in your thinking. Then we'll have a question and answer period before we wrap up.
And I just wanted to throw in, if you're time crunched or you're sort of sick of Zoom meetings and you just want a piece of this, feel free to join for the first half hour or the second half hour. You can jump off. I am not going to be offended. Will you be offended, Kaylee?
Not at all.
We wouldn't want to do anything to offend you, Kaylee.
So glad to hear that.
Well, Kaylee, what are you thinking about? What are you seeing?
Oh,
Understanding.
Yeah. You know, week to week, it's so interesting to me just observing what's happening for people and what I'm noticing, what's happening in my own life and in my own functioning in my family. And one of the things that I'm seeing is
It's unmuted.
Definitely more reactivity. People are expressing feeling more anxious and not always really understanding why, having trouble figuring that out. More tension between people and people struggling with managing that under these circumstances. You know,
So
people.
you feel like reactivity is clearly up in the
Yes.
people you're talking to?
Yes, I would say so for sure.
Give me a little picture of that. What makes, you know, if you compare it to 2 months ago, I mean, in a way it's obvious, but I
Yeah.
like to hear, what are you seeing?
Well, I'm hearing people describe themselves getting caught up in ways that they have been less caught up prior to this. And for a lot of people, that's looking like being sort of overly tuned in, overly monitoring other family members, sort of more anxiously jumping in to kind of calm some tension that may be happening between other people.
God, it sounds so good. I wish someone would do that with me.
You want somebody to come in and help manage you. I think
But this is an interesting thing that you're talking about, the over managing or something like that.
yeah.
What makes it over managing?
Well, I think just one example that in a conversation I had was a parent who found themselves quite distressed at watching an argument between her two adult daughters, and they're all living together right now. And it was not an out of control argument. They were capable of figuring it out, but she was struggling with managing her own distress about that. And when she was able to step back and get some physical space, she was able to recognize that they actually, things calmed down when she stepped out of the middle of that. So I think
there's that magic of a neutral presence who's in
Yeah.
contact with two parties who are maybe struggling or in conflict, but they're in contact with both, but they're not taking sides or trying to fix it. And I think you were telling me about this earlier, and you know, a couple of days ago, and you mentioned that this is a person who's actually gotten quite good at doing that.
Yeah.
But they're finding, oh, wow, I slipped back into not being as good at it.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm seeing is interesting is the arguments in the households between whose version of safety is the right one.
Mm-hmm.
You have college kids coming back who aren't wanting to be monitored, for example,
Yeah.
and that can get going. It can get going in couples where one person has one view, another has another, and of course this is playing out on a national stage. So I wonder how much of that is reactivity. Where's the line between healthy debate and unhealthy debate?
I think that's a really helpful question to pose, and perhaps is a helpful one for us all to entertain. You know, that in these circumstances, what is it to be safe, and how do we decide that? How much room is there for having some difference of opinion in that?
So what do you think about this idea of lessons from a virus?
I think it's an interesting one.
Why?
Well, because I think that one of the things that I'm hearing from people is this sense of awareness of everybody is in this. This is a global situation, and we're all in it. And perhaps, you know, our circumstances might be different, but that everybody is aware that we're in this situation because of this virus, and people are aware that their general anxiety is heightened. How might the virus and sort of the nature of the virus help us understand our own functioning a little bit better, and what's happening within our families a little bit better?
I've heard a number of people mention, and someone who was on this web meeting last week told me that they had noticed that there were new opportunities in this virus. Many
Mhm.
people are connecting multi-generationally via Zoom or phone calls that weren't before. And
Mhm.
there's a sense of people reaching towards each other. And there's a real opportunity in that beyond just the connectedness even, but to
Right.
maybe make relationships reset and put them on a stronger foundation.
Mhm.
But do you think, should I share a little bit about this virus story?
Yeah. Yeah, I
All right,
think
let's
people will
jump
be.
into that, and we'll do that for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then I'll get your thoughts on it, Cami. So here's this guy. I discovered this from my journeys. This man, Jeffrey K. Taubenberger, he's one of our great national experts on this virus. One of the top people at NIH on viral pathogenesis. And he said something really interesting. He in one of the articles I read, he said that this virus is like Loki, the Norse god. And Loki is a master of manipulation and deceit. He's a shapeshifter with superhuman strength, speed, durability, and longevity. Is that sounding familiar, Cami?
Mm. I would say that anxiety has many of those qualities.
Oh, and how about the virus?
Yeah,
Yeah, but
absolutely.
both, that's right. Both the
Yeah.
anxiety, it's interesting. Anxiety has those qualities. I want to follow up with you on that after I tell this story.
Okay.
So Loki is constantly using trickery to deceive those around him and cause trouble.
Mm.
So Taubenberger says this little fella here, quite beautiful, isn't it? I just love that picture.
Pretty, yeah.
Is a lot like this Loki, who my children tell me is part of some popular movie series that I have managed not to watch so far.
Me either.
And so here's how the virus is like Loki in a simple diagram. So here's the human respiratory system. Whoops. And this virus has a gift for stealth transmission. So it enters, as we know, through these pathways, the mouth and the nose, and it gets into the human airway. And then what it does, it hijacks our cells to create millions more versions of itself. And what's interesting about this is that Loki does this too. He can create like this illusion that there's 1,000 of them in a battle.
Mm.
And it gets into this human airway, and it's a chameleon that changes coats. So it gets your cells to put on its coat, and then it takes off its coat and pretend it's dead. And then what happens is the first responders wake up, and they're reacting to the way the virus has gotten its own cells to respond. So this is the immune system, the first responder elements of the immune system wake up. And they have, I understand there's a variation in the way they can respond. They've got flamethrowers. They destroy cells. So this is an incredibly helpful thing. They're differentiating between self and other, and they're going after other. And the problem is there's this hyperinflammation enigma in science. I found that term. I said, that's so interesting. They don't understand it, but there's this variation in the level of hyperinflammation. And the real problem when people, in most cases, this works.
Mm.
The symptoms you have are these, the symptoms you have are actually, you're feeling what's going on with your immune system. You're not feeling the virus. Most people, it's resolved in a few days, but then as we know, many, many people have this other response, and it wipes out tissue in the trachea and the bronchi that allow the virus to get deeper into the body, into the lung, and that's when it's really, really dangerous. So Taubenberger says that in some cases, the body's effort to heal itself may be too robust.
Mm.
And now I don't want to make this too simple. This is not to say, oh, we don't have control over these systems that I know of. You know, so it's not a simple thing, but this is really fundamental to this virus's behavior. And another researcher from Iowa said the virus matters, but the host response matters at least as much, and probably more. And I want to throw a recommendation out. If you're interested in these sorts of ideas, there's a chapter in this book, which is by Dr. Michael Kerr. He wrote it, it published last year, and there's a chapter in it called the Unidisease model, which goes into the way in which what I just told you about is a fundamental process in many, many diseases, and an increasingly long list of diseases, including psoriasis, MS, lupus, but also depression. That's new on the list, and many forms of cancer. So variation in level of reactivity, we talked about that a little bit last time. Here's a model variation in reactivity to the virus. And another researcher said this variation is most likely linked to differences in susceptibility and resistance rather than to differences in exposure to the virus. Now, this was in wild ducks with influenza from Sweden. So that's a pause point. Cami, what has this gotten you thinking about?
Well, it really, this is so interesting how you've presented some of this information about the virus, because it really leads me to think about how are, you know, the ways in which the body is responding to this, you know, outsider, this other, the virus. And how is that similar to what's happening in families that are experiencing more family stress, more reactivity? You know, what might the virus be able to sort of, what are the lessons and things we can learn from this virus, or how is family reactivity kind of similar to the way this virus is functioning?
Yeah, what's intriguing to me is the, you know, and we go on this journey in our training program and in our work with the Vermont Center for Family Studies, is this possibility that people can come to see that their reaction to a problem is really where their power is. And, you know, this is a universal truth, but Bowen theory has special tools for that journey. And in our training program, and that's one of the fundamental things that people do, is they pick a problem in their life, and it's usually one in their own family, because, you know, Bowen theory, we have a long tradition that that's the best way to learn it. And to see if I can discover how I am totally contributing to that situation that I have right there. Not that I'm to blame for it, but that the way I'm behaving, the way I'm responding is really where the action is for me. And it's just so inspiring when you see people get really good at developing that skill. And I think that's a foundation for becoming an excellent family therapist. In fact, I would submit, if you don't have that skill well built, you probably shouldn't meet with families. So, yeah.
So you're kind of, you're talking about in some way that a person's ability to observe and monitor and respond to their own reactivity can have quite an impact on not just themselves, but perhaps on a whole family atmosphere.
Ooh, that takes me to another slide. Okay. So just to note this, back to Loki for a sec, okay? There's this old story about Loki that a god got mad at him because he's such a liar and a manipulator, and chained him to a rock and got this serpent. And the serpent was dripping its venomous poison on him. Well, Loki's wife really liked him. Loki's got friends, just like the virus does in the body. And she put this bowl there and caught the venom. But when she had to dump the bowl, So she'd quickly try to dump it. A little bit of venom would hit him. His reaction to that caused what we now call earthquakes. Loki causes earthquakes, another connection between Loki and the virus. And this is a 1,000-year-old stone they found in Denmark. And you see those little scratch marks on the mouth? This is Loki with his mouth sewn shut because he's such a liar.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, these connections just inspire me. And I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to do a quick review, really brief. Not everyone was on this call. And I also think these ideas are so fundamental, they're worth going over. That humans vary in the degree to which they resolve the underlying dependency that they have on their families from 0 to 20, say, or 0 to 30, you could say. They vary. And the pair on the right, they have a more satisfying interdependence and a more stable interdependence than the pair down below in orange. I sit on the right, I'm in the blue, of course. And this variation is very substantial when it comes to this topic of reactivity. So the lightning bolt size shows the level of reactivity they have to each other. Now let's just pretend this is a couple or a aging mother and her daughter. They vary in the degree they get into each other's skin. And Kerr suggests that this variation may have a very powerful relationship with the variation that we saw to how the virus affects people. And again, this is a big enigma. There's no simple answer to that. I wouldn't want people taking that to the level where they thought that this was causal. But it's an interesting idea, how influential are relationships? And you just talked about leadership, Cami. So here's a picture that illustrates how this variation pertains to leadership. These are the same, these two families have the same, pretty much the same level of the resolution of that fundamental dependency. They have the same level of basic reactivity to each other. And they're in the same situation. They're both, let's say they're both in Brooklyn, New York, where we have beloved people dying during this pandemic. But there's a difference between them. And the difference is the grandmother. So on the right, we have a grandmother of one type, and on the left, a grandmother, the blue one, of another type. And by the way, Mark Flynn is one of our favorite researchers in Bowen theory. He's a top researcher on stress in children. And he has published a lot of very careful science showing that the presence of a grandmother has the power to erase the effects of trauma in children on the island that he's done 35 years of research in Dominica. So the lightning bolt difference shows the power of one person who's a little bit less stuck together, a little bit less reactive to this stuff, and the effect that has on the whole group and their experience of the group. So how do we get this free together, free apart? She's freer together and she's freer apart, that grandmother. And how pervasive is her influence? And here are some of her characteristics. I'm just going to let people read that.
Eric, one of the things that really stands out to me in this list of leadership characteristics is the theme of really monitoring and managing self versus other. It's in each one of those points on that what is leadership slide.
I really like the not reacting to the reactivity of others. You see it in the virus, it's a chain reaction. And I find this is challenging for humans. This is challenging for me. You know, what gets you going when you see other people reacting to things, and then you react, and you often think that it's their fault that you reacted.
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Mm-hmm. Some people I'm having interesting conversations with are talking a lot about the challenge of, they know it's helpful to try to have perspective about the situation, but they're struggling to have perspective of themselves and their own functioning in terms of under greater stress and in the situation that we're in, people are struggling to have perhaps more realistic expectations of themselves and other people. I think that it's been useful for people to talk about, this is a anxiety provoking situation and circumstance. And it makes sense that some of these things that maybe we have made gains on have been harder to maintain.
How about the not drawn into polarized debates?
Yeah.
When I heard that 30 years ago, that smacked me right in the forehead.
Mm-hmm.
I said, wow, am I bad at that? I'm telling you, you know, throw a polarized debate near me and I'm immediately going to try to show that I'm the smartest guy.
So that would really...
And that's just pure righteousness and not wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So one question I think people could consider in the breakouts is, do you know any grandmothers?
Mm.
Have you been around people who act like this?
Yeah.
And how did they affect you?
Yeah.
And I have the sense maybe it'd be a good time to move into the breakouts now. What do you think?
Yeah, it's about 2:25.
One thing I was thinking, it's not going to kill anybody if we end 5 or 10 minutes early.
No.
Shorter is usually better. So let me just hop over here. I'm going to skip that. I'll go back to that. Here's another question you could consider in your breakout groups for 10 minutes. Is that question clear, Cami?
Yeah, I think so.
What does it say? What does it mean to you? How would you restate it?
It says, you know, given some of the things you sort of talked about in your slide about the nature of the virus, you know, can we, are there similarities in what we're seeing in our own relationship systems? How in the nature of anxiety and and how it's being...
How does this metaphor, perhaps, of reactivity, is it a metaphor? Is it more than a metaphor? We don't really know.
Right.
How does it speak to you about what goes on in the groups you're operating in, whether that's in your work teams or your family that you're stuck together and stuck apart from, or any relationships of significance for you? So like I said last week, we're going to unmute you all. We're going to automatically put you into groups. There'll probably be some of 4. We'll keep the time. The breakout group will end automatically. You'll come back. I'm going to suggest that you don't need to introduce yourself. I think you can just get into talking. It's 10 minutes flies by. And if you want, you can shut off your video, or you can even mute yourself and just listen if you'd like. A lot of options for how you handle yourself in this breakout. And then when it's over, we're going to have more interaction via chat and also discussion. I'm going to be interested to hear what you're thinking about. All right, off we go into breakouts.
Okay, and I'm going to
open up the breakup room. Close all rooms. Right, welcome back. Hey, Cammie.
Hey there.
You want to give
You
me a
guys
little
are early.
you want to give me a report, Cammie, from your breakout room?
Yeah, there were a couple of the power of a grandmother, right? That might be a little bit more on the outside of the family anxiety and a little bit more of a neutral, less anxious presence. And people were reflecting on, working to be that presence, but also reflecting on a person in their family that is that kind of presence and the impact of that.
What are they like?
What's that?
What are they like?
They're sort of, the description was that this person is fairly self-assured. They're clear in what their sort of role is in the family and where their authority is, and are able to just be less anxious amidst the family atmosphere.
I want to ask a few other people to report in and maybe even ask a question, get some conversation going. And first, I would like to ask Caroline Sprague.
Sure.
Hey,
Hi.
what you thinking?
Well, in our group, we were just talking a little bit about sort of that grandmother personality, that person who is sort of kind of a calm in a storm. A sort of person who's, I think what Cammie said, knows their role in the family, is also kind of centered, and just in a situation where you start to feel that tension, that person is just sort of there absorbing and watching, but not actively trying to do anything. They're just there, they're observers, and that person can be very calming for whatever's going on in the system. And we were just talking about people that we know of in our families or in our lives that are like that, and what that feels like.
Carolyn, I'm wondering about this virus thing and the story I told about Loki and virus and reactivity. Do you have what are your questions about it? If you've got one. If you don't, I can move on and ask someone else. But.
Well, I've got a lot. I don't know if I can distill it right now. I've got a lot.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have a clearly thought out thing.
Let me ask Jackie Schwarz. Have you got a question?
Okay, I was just in the middle of telling a story that related to what you were saying, that Thich Nhat Hanh had talked about the boat filled with refugees and that they were vulnerable to attack by pirates. And he said that if one person on the boat would be calm, that it made all the difference in terms of whether or not those passengers survived.
Mm.
So, rather than panicking, which only increased their chances of danger, that one person made all the difference. And I think that grandmother and that one person in those people's families can be that calm in the storm, as Caroline was speaking about. So I don't have any questions, but that was one. Thank you for the opportunity to finish that story.
We have Jackie Schwarz all the way from California here. There's people from all over the country on this call. Most of us are from the frozen land of Vermont, where we have our frozen daffodils. But and they're so resilient, these daffodils. It's amazing. I am very inspired by the resilience of nature and also people around here in this virus. Before I go to Betsy Shuey to see if she has a question, because I'd like to get a question. And you could also use the chat function if you're out there and you want to ask a question. We probably have about 5 more minutes to do this portion. What was I going to say? Never mind, I can't remember. Betsy Shuey, do you have a question?
We had a really nice chat, and I don't have a question, just more observations about anxiety in this time. And I had the opportunity to speak with a family member who's fairly anxious in the family most of the time, and has gotten to the point where she has scheduled her day from the morning to night, very specifically talking about no relationship issues, but what she's doing and who she's seeing. And it's just her way of protecting herself, I think, with very little else that she allows in. And I'm wondering how that impacts on her being the primary care provider for her new grandchild. It's just an interesting thought. So
a lot of disruption of routines, and people rely on routines as primary anxiety regulation mechanisms. I remembered the thing I was going to say, which is that this grandmother figure is not always calm on the outside. They can also push back on irresponsible behavior with great effectiveness and poise and power. And I'm wondering what the grandparent in the body is. I wish I could ask Dr. Taubenberger that question. Who can handle Loki in the body?
Can you say that again? Handle Loki?
Loki.
Oh, Loki, yes.
Yes, so we have, what else, if the virus is Loki, then who's grandma in the body? I'd actually like to ask that question to Sarah Davis. So I want to pause for a minute to promote our June 5th symposium. We got a preview of the presentations that will happen at the symposium on June 5th, which will either be via Zoom or, I'm still holding out some hope. Who knows, that could be a meeting we have in person. And Sarah Davis is going to present on neuroinflammation and Bowen theory. And this has traditionally been a very successful meeting with lots of stories, interesting stories. And we heard an amazing story of family leadership related to estrangement or the risk of estrangement between an adult sister and an adult brother. And that story, I can vouch there's tremendous wisdom in it, will be presented on that during that event as well. Looks like we got some questions coming in by chat, Cami. Do you see those?
I do not. Hang on. No, I don't see the.
Okay, I'm opening it up now. Who is the Loki in any particular reactive system? And who is co-opted by Loki or the virus for his purposes? And who is the grandmother who actualizes those leadership qualities displayed earlier? That's a great question. Who is the Loki? One thing about the Loki in families is that they often can be blamed for the trouble. So the Loki in a family could be a depressed teenage girl, say, who everyone worries about. It could be the self-injuring person who comes to the ER on a regular basis and stimulates the ER. Who is the Loki in a family? Do you have any thoughts on that, Cami?
Well, I'm thinking about that idea that, in a family, Loki often is who we maybe see as the most symptomatic, right? Or, and maybe the Loki changes who it is based on what's going on. Maybe different people are in that role of Loki at different times, right?
Loki could be an angry person who people quietly hide from or dodge around or accommodate and then talk about behind their back what a tyrant they are. I think what's important in all these examples is that the family leader is the one who doesn't get obsessed with changing Loki. In fact, this sewing of Loki's mouth shut, I find fascinating. What does it take to sew Loki's mouth shut? And I think, you know, it's hard to get Loki to shut up. It's much more, I think if many people find a lot more success if they become a student of their reactivity to Loki. And that can also have a powerful effect on Loki. In the ancient mythology, he helps out the gods at times and he's a pain at other times. He has power, he has a role, he can help, he has gifts. Like these people in the family that we just described, they might have gifts.
Yeah, it makes me think a little bit about folks I'm talking with who, we talked about this the other day, Eric, how some people in this situation seem to be absorbing more of the stress in a family than others. And I'm finding that interesting to think about. And one of the things I'm seeing in some of this is the degree to which some people are personalizing things going on, you know, in their families, in their situation, and that that perhaps is a signal that that person may be absorbing more of the stress and the anxiety in the family.
Yeah, that's interesting. Kaylee, Stacy, I don't know if you're out there. I'm wondering if you have a question. What are you thinking about? Unfortunately, it's freezing up, Kaylee. I can't hear you.
I think I have a lot of questions.
So maybe if you have one, Kaylee, maybe you could chat it in. Just send it in by chat.
Okay. Next time.
So if you have one, what does it look like to work my family up or down? And what is my role in that? I'm not sure what that means. She might mean up the generations. Back to the comments someone made about the opportunities in this. In the ancient Vedic tradition of India, they say the best way to cultivate the heart is take care of your parents. Unless you're completely sucked into that and it's taking you down and making you drown. For many people, this is an opportunity right now. The older folks are the most vulnerable ones. I think a great proportion of the people who died in China were over 70. Very high proportion. I believe it was 85%. And so this is a time when in our family, nieces and nephews are sending letters and essays that they write for school in the mail to the grandparent to read them. So, because the grandparents in the nursing homes are really in a tough spot. They're stuck, and I'm concerned that there's going to be a health impact on that, because along with the virus, the disruption for them, they're vulnerable, and their disruption in their social connectivity. We know that loneliness is a really big deal for the aged.
Yeah.
And it's not just a big deal emotionally. Dr. John Cacioppo in Chicago has laid out the incredibly powerful effect that loneliness has on the physiology. It's quite stunning. And that this is a particular challenge for the elderly. So we have a health risk coming from that direction for them as well.
So there are opportunities to really try to be bridging those gaps as is possible in this situation. Those are lovely examples of sharing a piece of yourself, that person-to-person contact and connection, in that sort of a way. That's, yeah.
So I'm thinking it's moved towards a wrap here, wrap in about four or 5 minutes. I want to mention again that I'm just really grateful to our sponsor, Pomerleau Real Estate. The message Pomerleau Real Estate wants us to send out is buy local. Ernie Pomerleau's line is, when's the last time you saw Amazon on the back of a Little League t-shirt? So we've all heard about the distress that local businesses are facing here, especially in retail, where they're just shut down. A lot of them don't have a big cash reserve, and it's like a life-threatening situation. The people have put their heart and soul into these businesses. So if you have the opportunity, Pomerleau Real Estate asks, try to spend the money, keep it out of the internet, and keep it local when you have the chance to do that. And they also sponsored our meditation and family health conference last year, which is going to happen again in October. I'm thinking I'm going to call it Meditation and Family Leadership. And I just want to put a bug in your ear to keep your eye out for that. If you're on this call, we're going to have 2 researchers, one Fred Travis, who studies higher stages of human development. He's a neuroscientist, and another one from the University of Southern California. His name is Raul Khan, and he's with the Center for Mindfulness Science. And it'll be an interdisciplinary dialogue with these 2 scientists and Bowen Family Systems scientists. And I also want to mention that we have a training program. And the deadline for applying to the training program is in May. So if you're interested in going on a year-long journey with these ideas, it's particularly designed for professionals. Most of the people in the meeting are therapists, although not every single one. We do consider applications from non-therapists. Under certain circumstances, that's a good fit. And we just go on a year journey, going deep into these ideas once a month in the morning. So that's another opportunity that I want to highlight for you. And again, our symposium on June 5th, which is easy to promote because it's always an amazing meeting. What else did I forget? Thank you for those of you who gave us some quick feedback last month. We're going to just keep going. I don't know exactly yet what we're going to talk about next week, but we will be here, same time, same Zoom channel. We'll put something else up. We have a list of guests that we're considering. If you've got an idea for a topic you'd like to hear us about, shoot a chat right now or send an email to us in the channel you received from. Any last thoughts, Kelton?
I'm not anything in particular. I think my mind is still sort of working on some of this stuff about family activity and the idea of what does it look like to bring a little more leadership to the self and to your role in a family. What does that look like for us individually? So I'm thinking about that more and more.
Well, here's another old quote that says something about that. Let me make this. And with that, we'll let you go.
That's a good
Enjoy
one.
the rest of your week, and I hope to see you back here again next week.
Thank you, Eric.